So let's take a listen to this.
Artifact farming in Genshin Impact sucks. We all know it, this is nothing new. The system isn't unfixable, but these suggestions which you've probably heard up until now won't actually work, or at least not as well as you'd think. But let's take a step back first. So obviously the decision to make artifact farming so tedious and unending was intentional to get players to continue playing the game, but the implementation is so terrible that it has the opposite effect on players like me who are completely unmotivated to even try. Storytime. In 1.2, when the Blizzard Strayer artifact set dropped, I farmed every day that patch to get a 5-star cryo damage cup or crit damage hat, and never got either. That experience scarred me so much that now I don't even bother farming artifacts for new characters, and when needed, I will
We all
just
go
steal
through
them
the
off
same
of
thing.
others. And I'm sure there are others who feel the same way I do. So far, the only direct adjustment
Don't we
we've
all?
gotten to the artifact farming process is the introduction of 3-to-1 rerolls through strong boxes. But even if they were to add them to the rest of the artifact sets, that wouldn't do anything about solving the root of the problem. So it turns out that after I finished recording this, they announced during the 3.0 reveal that they are adding artifact strong boxes for the artifact sets that were released up to version 1.
By the way, chat, I should add that this video was from, last year. When did it exactly come out? August 14th. Actually, it's almost been, a year and a half ago. So yeah, this video is rather old, so just keep that in mind. Some of the information here might be a little bit outdated. I just wanted to react to this video because it popped up on my video recommended feed after I made my how to improve Genshin video. So I just want to see what kind of ideas this dude has when it comes to improving artifact farming.
2, which is admittedly nice because you can convert sets you don't want into sets you do want, but still doesn't change the rest of this video. So today we're going to fully understand what about artifact farming is the root of the problem, and then discuss the pros and cons of some other ways in which it can be fixed to give the system a much healthier gameplay loop. But before we get into it, this video is
fucking sponsor.
There are so many cascading levels of RNG that make it very unlikely to get what you want, and essentially impossible to get exactly what you want. To give further context to what I'll be discussing, here's a breakdown of the 7 ways random number generation is a factor in artifact farming. I'm not confident enough to be able to calculate the exact probabilities for every outcome, but this visualization should be enough for you to grasp just how crazy stupid the system is. So for every 20 resin you spend, you are guaranteed at least one 5-star artifact if you are above adventure rank 45, and this will be the starting point. From there, you can get a piece from either of the 2 artifact sets available in each domain. After that, there are 5 different artifact pieces in each set. Flowers and feathers always have flat health and attack as their main stats respectively, but sands, cups, and hats each have a multitude of options, and those options are not evenly weighted. Besides the sands, which are pretty easy to get attack on, specifically getting the generally most desirable main stats are rare. 5% for a specific elemental damage bonus, and 10% for a specific crit stat. And for some reason, elemental mastery is even lower than those. So to get that cryo piece I mentioned earlier, assuming even distribution of sets and artifact types, that's a 1 in 200 probability. In
I
other
hope
words,
you took probability
it would
in
take
back
on
in
average
school, chat.
100 domain runs to get just one of these. And we're not even at substats yet. This is where it goes from a rough grind to
I should add
utterly
the dice
ridiculous.
cringe.
A 5-star artifact is generated with either 3 or 4 subsets on it, each coming from a list of 10 potential stats. A substat cannot be the same as the main stat, so in most cases it's 9, but it's not like it matters because again, the distribution is always weighted towards flat HP, attack and defense, and against crit rate and crit damage. Then, each substat has an internal tier value from 1 to 4, which determines its base value and growth per level. And finally, which of the 4 existing substats gets upgraded every 4 levels on your artifact comes down to
defense.
Even though I'm a huge proponent of the idea that your artifacts aren't automatically trash just because they have a few undesirable substats, the whole system is clearly way too harsh. Now, obviously the most straightforward solution would be to remove layers of RNG by letting players have some form of choice in the outcome before the RNG roll begins. In a very ideal world, most of them would be removed, but we need to stay realistic. So which would be the best to remove if I had to choose one? Choosing the artifact set would seem good from a logistical standpoint, but that only eliminates the first 50-50 and wouldn't really change much.
I also
Picking the
suggest
type
that in
of
my own
piece
video
would be
too.
much better, and is actually what's going to be implemented in Hoyo vs. Next game, Zenless Zone 0. Any level
Which is gonna have its third
really
bonus
work
or
since
third
the possible
closed
outcomes
beta
are then
soon.
dependent on whatever kind of piece you receive. But even if Genshin did decide to implement choosing the type, I still think it would only be a surface level solution and not fix the core of the issue. At the end of the day, what I find to be the biggest problem about artifact farming isn't just the insanely rare chance of getting a perfect artifact, but rather the fact that I can spend an infinite amount of time farming just to end up not getting anything close to what I want. I strongly believe that players would be much more willing to go through the incredibly repetitive process of farming if it was guaranteed that they'd eventually get the artifacts they desire. This concept is absolutely nothing new. In fact, it's already implemented in Genshin in other areas. For example, the pity system on wishing. We kind of take it for granted nowadays, but not all gacha games even have it, making it possible to spend thousands of dollars without ever receiving the
Is
featured
this
character,
Diablo
and others
Immortal?
make it less accommodating by having it not carry over from banner to banner. Having a generous pity system not only makes the user experience
I've
much
never
better
actually
across
seen
the board, but it
Diablo
can push
Immortal
players that
gameplay.
wouldn't normally spend money to buy Primo Gems if they know they are guaranteed to get that character they really want, justifying the system's existence even from a business perspective. With weekly bosses, you might get unlucky and not receive the one talent upgrade material you need out of 3, but you know that as long as you keep farming weekly bosses, before long you will have enough dream solvent to make it happen yourself. Unlike with artifact farming, these systems give you a clear end goal to work towards. You won't even have to use them if you just happen to get lucky, but if you aren't lucky, it doesn't completely invalidate the time and resources you had just put in. If a system like the one I'm about to describe is added to Genshin Impact, I genuinely believe that it would greatly improve the player
Hey,
experience
Dalnix, thanks for
while
redeeming
also
Uwu.
better accomplishing the original goal of
Is
getting
Diablo
players
Immortal
to
still up? I don't know.
continuously
I
sink
assume
time
it
into
is.
the game by simply being more intuitive. I have two separate concepts for implementations since there are many possibilities, each with some pros and cons. The first one focuses on artifact main stats. Let's say that at some kind of station, you can break down sands, goblets, or circlets into that artifact type's essence, which represents the broken artifact
This is
main
what
stat.
Star Rail
When you have
eventually
enough of a
ends up
single
doing.
stat, you can consume them to change any artifact's main stat to that one. This works because as you farm, you are going to end up getting main stats that are good, but not the specific one you were looking for. In this scenario, and in ones where you have a good main stat but absolutely terrible substats, that artifact won't be completely useless since it can contribute to a better artifact later down the line. And yeah, if the new main stat was one of the substats, it would have to be replaced, probably randomly. Essence like this would also incentivize you to upgrade artifacts you normally wouldn't care about due to their main stat, since you could just replace it. I feel like this system is a little bit less useful now than it would have been previously due to the addition of more characters that scale off of stats that used to be considered useless, but it would still make things much easier in terms of being able to get solid 4-piece sets and retains the initial design of certain main stats being more rare without making them impossible to farm. Substats would still for the most part be outside of player control, so this style would appeal more to players that lean on the casual side, since it would greatly increase your chances of getting good artifacts and only slightly help your odds of getting a great artifact. My second
Because for the most part, casual players in Genshin, they don't have to have like completely built like amazing substat artifacts, right? Because all you need, I've always told people this, if you're a casual player in Genshin, you don't really need to grind artifacts like us hardcore players do. All you need to do is just have the appropriate main stats on your characters, and like that's good enough for the most part from a casual perspective. So yeah, being able to change or like control what main stat you get is yeah, more so catering to casual players.
implementation instead focuses on substats. First off, make 5-star artifacts always begin with 4 substats because there's no reason why it shouldn't. Alright, so now for the idea. Let's say
Amen,
a new
brother.
resource
Speak your
is added
facts.
to domain drops. Using these would allow you to reroll any particular aspect of an artifact's substats. You could reroll a substats tier, reroll what substat is in a slot, and for fully upgraded artifacts, you can reroll the distribution of upgrades. However, by spending either a higher rarity version of this resource or simply spending a greater amount at once, you can guarantee the option you want instead of rerolling. No matter what, you are still at the mercy of RNG, but this at least gives you some form of concrete progress towards your goal on every domain run. Being luckier and getting a good artifact at the gate is still rewarded since you don't have to invest as much, and you wouldn't be able to get your ideal artifact without spending a lot of time, but with this your end goal would at least be feasible. This style obviously appeals much more to hardcore players since you need to spend way more investment to get any kind of payout, but it would also make for much more rewarding final outcomes. So yeah, while of course Hoyoverse giving players some initial choice in farming artifacts wouldn't hurt, I can't say it would be enough to motivate me to get back to hitting domains. I really do think artifact farming continues to be the worst aspect of the entire game, and seeing that we're almost 2 years in, it kind of hurts to see it's gone essentially unchanged, but that doesn't mean it can't be changed now. I'm gonna stay hopeful because Hoyoverse has made system adjustments in the past because of player feedback, and yeah, I just really don't want to try my luck for a Dendro Damage Cup when those are released. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys found this video to be interesting or
I feel that one, bro. I remember when Dendro first came out, like I didn't get a semi-decent Dendro Cup until like, I don't know, a month or two later. I forget who I was able to give my first like pretty good Dendro Cup to. Probably Alhytham, honestly. This was made 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. This video came out back in August 2022. So almost 2 years, year and a half ago. Artifacts can go up to 60 CV. I'm sure they can if you get like absolutely like max rolls and you start with a 4-line artifact. It starts with double crit and every single roll goes into like either crit rate, crit damage, and it max rolls the entire time. Something like that probably. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you can beat the game and Spiral Abyss with just 3 or 4-star artifacts. Yes, but 36 starring is a different story. I would imagine it'd be pretty tough to like 36 star with just 3 or 4-star rarity artifacts. Artifact farming is life and life is pain. Sure sounds like MiHoYo's motto for this game. So, okay, let's see. Let's review what he suggested here. Basically, for main stat, he's suggesting the what's this channel's name? Red Flame, okay. Basically what Red Flame is suggesting for the main stat part is to basically allow you to break down 5-star artifacts into like this resource, or like I think he calls it an essence, where you can use that resource to directly change the main stat of an artifact, right? And yeah, that's a really good idea. Just being able to change the main stat of your artifact wholesale is obviously very good, because that means that you can go back to your old artifacts. It incentivizes people. It rewards people who have kept who have basically hoarded a lot of their like good artifacts, right? Because like I'm sure we all have some like, you know, artifacts where, oh yeah, they roll double crit, but their main stat was something like kind of shit, right? Oh, you got a defense % double crit cup or something, and how awesome would it be if it had rolled, I don't know, pyro bonus damage instead, right? Instead of fucking defense % all day. So that is a good idea. And I think eventually Star Rail, you know, that came out last year, ended up going with like a similar-ish idea where you can break down your 5-star relics into your relic scrap fragments or whatever they're called, and you can use those to like basically re-roll another whole new 5-star relic or whatever. It's still RNG unless you use one of those self-modeling resins for. So yeah, I like this idea. I believe that's the focus. That's the main part of what he was talking about here for the main stat essence thing. The more interesting thing, I think he was the more interested part, or the part that I'm more interested in, is the substat rolling. And I believe he's suggesting that I don't know exactly what he suggested. Maybe some sort of item. Let me listen to the beginning part of
Instead,
this again.
focuses on substats. First off, make 5-star artifacts always begin with 4 substats
Yeah, I agree
because
with
there's
that.
no reason why it shouldn't. Alright, so now for the idea. Let's say a new resource is added to
Okay.
domain.
So he's advocating for a new resource where you can directly manipulate your substats, I believe, right? I think he suggests that you should be able to change your substats, I believe, something like that, or like at the very least, like be able to reroll your substats or whatever, right? Or reroll the values, the individual values of your subsets, something like that. So that's also a decent idea too. Say main stat this one and then substat this one. So yeah, having a resource that you can acquire either through breaking down relics, artifacts, or like obtaining them as part of like playing the like rewards for playing the game, like I don't know, daily rewards or event rewards, something like that. Yeah, these are solid ideas for sure. Um, I watched this video mainly because I came up with my own video, I think the other week, 2 weeks ago at this point, 3 weeks ago, where it's basically a general how to improve Genshin video that's like an hour long. And part of that section, I talk about a big part of that a big section that I put into that video was me giving my own take on how to improve not just artifact farming, just but farming in general, right? And so I wanted to watch this video to compare what Red Flame's ideas are like compared to mine. I would say that in general, his ideas are way more direct. Way more direct. Because I don't go so far as to suggest being able to change main stats of already existing artifacts. I believe if that's what he was talking about in this video. I believe I kind of throw around ideas for the subsection part where maybe there can be items where you can sort of manipulate your substats and like kind of change them or like reroll their values or something like that, or maybe even swap out their values and swap out what substats they are entirely for new ones, like the ones that you actually want, be it crit rate or EM or ER or whatever, what have you. So they are I think technically his ideas would be better. However, for my ideas that I pitched in my my Genshin video, I start with the assumption, or I start with the baseline that MiHoYo just gets rid of resin entirely. So Red Flame's ideas make more sense in the context of Genshin still having a stamina system. In other words, resin, right? If we still have to deal with resin, then yeah, having this sort of system where you can directly change your main stats and directly manipulate your substats makes sense because you can't farm infinitely. Because my ideas for artifact farming are based on what if MiHoYo gets rid of resin completely, right? And before I go further, in case people are like, oh, well, MiHoYo's never going to get rid of resin, like, how can you say they're going to get rid of that? Well, at the same time, it feels like they're never going to change how you farm for artifact farming, so, might as well hope that MiHoYo also gets rid of resin farming too, because them getting rid of resin as a stamina system is as likely as them improving their artifact farming system. So like, what's the difference, right? Actually, let me take that back. Actually, my ideas for my how to improve Genshin video. I actually don't advocate for the removal of resin. I actually suggested that last year. Now that I think about it, for this year's video, I was like, okay, so maybe you don't need to get rid of resin, but instead of having like all your domains, your talent book domains, your weapon essential material domains, your artifact domains for that matter, elite bosses, weeklies, whatever, right? Instead of them having requiring resin, right, for you to have resin to redeem for rewards, instead just make everything just free. Right? Don't get rid of the resin system or the stamina system in Genshin. Just make everything that you would normally spend resin for just free. So that way you can just farm however much you want. Infinite farming as much as you want. And then you still have the resin system, so that way if you want to accelerate your farming progress, right? If you want to farm faster, then you can choose to pay 40 resin or something to get double your rewards. Like just like how Red Flame in the substat part right here, where it
My
talks about
second
how
implementation
right here.
instead focuses on substats. First off, make 5-star artifacts always begin with 4 substats because there's no reason why it shouldn't.
Yeah. So just like how Red Flame suggests that 5-star artifacts should always start with 4 line instead of having a chance to only start with 3. I want the resin cost, the mandatory resin cost for everything that happens with something that's related to account progression, right? Again, elite bosses, weekly bosses, domains. Just get rid of that resin cost entirely, and then instead use the resin that you currently have to to accelerate your farming progress instead of being required for you to progress. Like instead of it being an obstacle or a roadblock that you have to have enough of to get past, just make it free and just let your resin make your farming progress faster. And so I work off my improvements, my suggestions for improvements for artifact farming are based on that. So to go into more detail about my ideas for farming artifacts, rather than give you the ability to directly manipulate the main stat for these artifacts, my suggestion is to allow players to set what main stat artifact they want to go for at the start of the domain, right? Before you even, as you go into a domain, right? Say for example you choose, I don't know, gilded domain, right, to farm some gilded pieces for your Miko or somebody. When you first enter it, right, and when you click on your difficulty and select your team to farm with, right, sometime during those windows, during those UIs, I think that there should be another menu or another UI that asks you, hey, by the way, what main stat do you want your desired artifact to have, right? In matter of fact, I think Red Flame suggests it in his own video, but I think that the domain should should allow you to set, okay, what set do you want to farm? Like what's your preferred set, so that way the domain weights your artifact drops towards that one set, right? Not guaranteed still, but it's because, again, it doesn't need to be guaranteed because now all your domains are free. You can farm them infinitely. But it will give you more pieces of your desired set more than usual. And not only that, but you can also choose your main stat, so that way, if you go a certain number of runs without getting an artifact of that particular type and main stat, you will just get one for free if you do enough runs. So you're always working, like Red Flame says, you're always working towards something, right? The substats themselves will still be random, but at the very least, you can guarantee yourself a main stat of a particular relic artifact type from a particular set. So, yeah, a lot of my ideas are very similar to Red Flame's. They just work in a different way because we're working off different bases here. Because obviously Red Flame is still assuming that there's still going to be a resin system in place that necessitates, a system where you should be able to directly manipulate main stats and substats, whereas my improvements or my suggestions work off of the assumption that there is no more resin, or rather, domains no longer cost resin, so therefore you can farm these as much as you want. And then for the substats, actually his ideas and mine should be very similar. Yeah, as in like we both have ideas about how to directly manipulate substats. Yeah, I think his and ours, if I remember correctly, which I should. It hasn't been that long since I last made my how to improve Genshin video, 2024. But yeah, I believe our substat ideas are relatively similar. I forget if I also mentioned if 5-star artifacts should just get rid of 3-line starts entirely. So if I didn't mention that, then Red Flame's suggestion of getting rid of 3-line start 5-star artifacts is obviously very good, because who wants to deal with those? But yeah, Everything that he talked about for the substat rolling stuff, I also agree with. I think where we deviate though is that he again, just like his main stat suggestion, where you can break down 5-star artifacts into like a resource that you can then use to change a main stat on another 5-star artifact. He also goes with like some sort of resource that you can acquire somehow that allows you to manipulate substats to how you see fit. I think I don't suggest anything like that, any sort of like resource base for that. As a matter of fact, yeah, I think the most I suggest is like some sort of item, not necessarily like an accruable resource, but an item that allows you to like mess with substats directly in some way, and like that can be like an item or reward that you get for doing like endgame stuff as part of my endgame change suggestions that I made earlier in my own How to Improve Genshin video. But that's another topic entirely, the endgame stuff. Instead, I think the big thing with my Substat suggestions is that I want I actually suggest that 5-star artifacts should get an additional enhancement level from +20 to +24. I think that's actually what I wanted to go for, which would add even more RNG. But that's the context for that would be that I also suggest a lot of endgame additions to Genshin as well. A lot more endgame modes other than just what we have for Abyss 9 through 12. Like one of my suggestions is to expand Abyss so that now we have floors 13 to 16, which are even harder than 9 through 12. Right? So my suggestion for expanding artifact enhancements to +24 makes more sense there, because if you're fighting against even tougher enemies than what you see in 9 to 12, then there should also be some sort of improvement to your character's gear to go along with that, so that your characters can scale properly with the enemies you see in 13 to 16. So that was the crux of my suggestions for substats. Like, make artifacts more powerful as well, along with endgame expansions. So instead of plus 25-star artifacts, they should go up to all the way up to like plus 24 or something. I don't know. And then like you should have like actually I do suggest some resources as well, but like endgame reward resources that you can use to quote limit break your 5-star artifacts, so that way they can become plus 24 instead of staying at plus 20. I think the last major suggestion I added to the substat part is that when you get a 5-star artifact to plus 24, they should get a fifth substat line. That's pretty different, sort of similar, but pretty different, like its own thing compared to your first 4. So obviously we all know that 5-star artifacts can have up to 5 different substats, right? So basically my idea is that when you have a 5-star artifact hit plus 20, this theoretical plus 24, not only do they get their 6th substat roll, but also you get a 5th line that's added to their original 4. That's like that pulls from like a variety of substats that are slightly different. They can be pretty similar to the first 4, but they should also include unique substat lines for such as like, extra elemental skill damage, or like extra elemental burst damage, or stuff like that. And you should be able to choose between like 2 different pools. So basically it's two different versions of the same buff, right? The extra elemental skill damage I mentioned earlier, the 2 pools are basically solo buffs and then team buffs, where if you're working on an artifact for a DPS servant, obviously they care more about the solo buffs, right? Because they'll have better values for their own damage. So for them, you want to give them the solo version of those sorts of buffs. But for support characters, because they're supports, you want to give them the team version. And the trade-off is that their substats will be for the entire team, but their individual values will be lower compared to like their solo versions. So, but by doing that, that means that there's incentives for you to plus 24 artifacts for any character, not just your DPSs, but also for your supports as well. Because if you don't have that sort of system, I feel like there's not really much of a reason to level up, like to limit break your 5-star artifacts for your support characters. You would just limit break your artifacts for your DPS characters instead, and your support characters are just gonna hang around just sucking their own dicks or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's about it for my artifact, like my own artifact improvement suggestions. So it was interesting to see what Red Flame came up with, especially because, again, remember that this was from a year and a half ago. Again, this video aired back in August 14th, back on August 14th, 2022. So again, yeah, a year and a half ago. So it's very nice that other people like Red Flame have come up with these sorts of ideas, because I think at its core our ideas are fairly similar, but they do deviate from each other quite a bit, because again, Red Flame still is still working off the assumption that we will still have resin, which, to his credit, we most likely will. Whereas I suggest for there to be no resin cost for any domain, and so that changes how I've pitched my own suggestions. If when I was making my how to improve Genshin video that I put out 2-3 weeks ago, had I forced myself to assume that we will still have resin, so we're gonna have a limited amount of stamina to work with, I think I would have gone with Red Flame's ideas as well, where like if we still have to deal with resin as a stamina system in Genshin Impact, then yeah, the best way to handle artifact improvements to artifact farming would be to do what he's suggesting here, where you get a resource that allows you to directly manipulate stats, because again, that is the most efficient way and probably the fairest way for you to be able to improve your artifact farming experience. I would still say that I think the ideal situation would be to sort of combine my ideas with my ideas for like main stat farming, at least, where before you enter a domain, the game asks you, oh, what kind of relic type do you want to farm for? And then what sort of main stat do you want that relic type, or artifact type rather, to give you, right? And then there should be like a bar at the bottom where after you do so many runs, it should fill up gradually over time with every run you do or something. And then once it's once it's completely filled out, the game should give you that extra artifact that's exactly the main stat and the artifact type that you set for it. So a combination of my idea for the whole preset main stat artifact type sort of thing with his idea of, oh, there should be a resource where you can acquire from breaking down previous artifacts or artifacts that you don't want, or maybe you can acquire from, like, I don't know, Abyss 12 rewards or something like that, or event rewards or something somewhere. Like a combination of these ideas would be like fantastic for Genshin artifact farming in the future. But who knows? Obviously, MiHoYo, it's up to MiHoYo at the end of the day if they ever want to implement something like that. Doubtful if they ever will, but never say never. So yeah, I'm glad I watched this video. It's very how should I say? It's nice to know that people had similar ideas even far back as 2022. I mean, 2022 wasn't that long ago, but now that it's 2024, it certainly feels like it, doesn't it? But yeah, good video by Red Flame. Some solid ideas here. I would say that my own ideas were a little bit more fleshed out, but again, they were working off of a completely different base of like the assumption that no domains ever costs resin, because let's face it, stamina systems are freaking bullshit anyway in gacha games as a whole, but we have to deal with them because fuck us, I guess. But in any case, yeah, glad I watched this video. It was a good watch, and yeah, had some pretty good ideas that I certainly agree with. So anyways, that'll be it for this video. Peace.